Dialectical behavior therapy was created in the 1980s by Marsha Linehan in Seattle, Washington.
Today, DBT is taught all over the world.
We're two therapists who believe everyone can benefit from DBT skills.
I'm Kate.
I'm Michelle.
And this is DBT and Me.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
We're back with a Q&A that feels like a long time for us, but we know you all have had some Q&As to tide you over, but this is our first newly recorded Q&A since I've come back from maternity leave. So we are excited to get back into it with, I guess this is Q&A number 63.
You have nothing fun to say about 63. Poor 63.
Poor 63.
I've got nothing.
Boring random number. So you can kick us off, Kate, when you're ready.
Yeah, well, I do want to give one little thing to tell people, because bless Meg's heart, she will do an amazing job of editing, and anytime I manage to cough when I'm not simultaneously talking, I'm sure she'll take right care of that, but see, maybe she left that one in for effect. Coughing like a lot these days, guys, and so I'm sure that at some point I'll just be mid-sentence and have to cough, so I apologize in advance. There's nothing Meg's gonna be able to do to get rid of all of them. I see, Michelle, it's obviously been this long because I can't remember if you're weird for not having done any of the Patreons. Did we not do that at stuff? See, I can't remember. It's been so long.
Don't have to worry about it for Q&A.
Oh my God, I can't remember what we do anymore, Michelle.
Reading.
I don't know where I live anymore. Points to anybody who can tell me what I'm quoting when I say I don't know where I live anymore. I'm serious, guys. Post it. Here I go. Sometimes I get blindsided with really strong emotions or just spiraling in general. When tough moments come on slowly, or at least slowly enough that I'm able to use critical thinking skills, I feel I have a shot at handling the situation. But when I'm blindsided, it's like my brain is just gone. I've been thinking lately about the best way to approach dealing with this problem, and my best guess is to use some of the skills daily, even when I'm feeling fine. That way, it might lessen those moments that blindside me, or at least possibly help me see warning signs that they're coming. Can anyone else relate to this and or have advice on a good way to approach this type of problem? It's like when I can feel my stress bar go up, I at least have a chance to cope. But when it goes from 0 to 100 without my noticing any signs, I'm screwed. It's already too late. My second guess is to try and make skills subconscious/habitual, similar to muscle memory, kind of bypassing the critical thinking part of my brain.
Yeah, this is a thing that comes up a lot, I feel like, when it comes to DBT. I think this listener is getting at a common question that a lot of people have, which is like, yes, I find the value in skills. Yes, I want to use skills. Yes, I am using skills. And they're like, and then also, life throws a huge, gigantic whammy at me that I never saw coming. And I feel like I'm just floundering and I'm completely unskillful. And then it feels like all of my hard work was for nothing because I didn't respond skillfully in a really, really stressful situation. I guess maybe it feels important to start by naming that there are going to be things in life that do really blindside us that we can't prepare for. That happens. One that I can think of for me personally was back when I was in a decently bad car accident. Like, my airbag deployed and my car was totaled, and I got out of the vehicle and my legs were jello. And, talk about going from 0 to 100. I was just, in a total state of shock that I had just rear-ended someone so badly and my car went off the road and all of that, right? Like, I was not in a state of mind to think, well, what skills could I use here? Like, no, it doesn't necessarily work that way. Like, so I want to start by saying that because I think it's important that we all have compassion for ourselves, that there will be times where life will hand us one and we are going to be completely flooded and we're going to feel like we're just in over our heads. That's going to happen. However, I really hope that those times are few and far between. Like, maybe a couple times a year. I hope things like that are happening to you. Or even better, maybe, every few years you have one of those really, really big moments that takes you by surprise and you are just, really, really in it. That's hopefully not happening very often. So because of that, it is a great approach to use skills daily, right? Like they were saying, they were like, my best guess is to use some of the skills daily, even when I'm feeling fine. I could not agree with that more. Is that practicing skills daily does increase the likelihood that you will have something to draw on in those 0 to 100 moments. I think it's also important to name that skills are there to help you behave, hence the B in DBT, help you behave skillfully. You can feel emotionally, internally, a very strong emotion, right? A ton of fear, a bunch of rage, right? It's not about necessarily tempering the emotion that comes with the stressful event, but it is going, okay, what am I going to do with this? And it is going to feel hard to maybe feel in the driver's seat of what you're doing, because you're just going to probably go into this like survival mode type of place. But hopefully it will increase the chances that you will act skillfully, even when you're feeling a really, really heightened, huge emotional state, if you've been acting skillfully daily for quite some time. It just sets you up better for that to potentially happen in those moments. As far as skills go, though, one skill that I really like is effective rethinking and paired relaxation, because there's a lot in between the 0 to 100, right? There are those really major, hugely stressful moments, but there's a lot of, let's say, like 50s in there too, right? You're going to have stressful days at work. You're going to have fights with partners. You're going to have things that happen in your life that are going to happen more consistently, unfortunately, where you're just kind of like, man, today just kind of sucked. Like, I'm not in crisis. My life isn't falling apart. But today just sucked for one reason or another. It was harder. And knowing that you're going to have days like that, I think effective rethinking and paired relaxation can be good if you're having things like that come up on a semi-consistent basis in your life to help you prepare for those things. That's a good skill to kind of flex your muscle with and to use consistently. I really like that skill for helping us make sure that we are calming ourselves before we are in the stressful situation. That could be a really good one to use. So skills wise, that would be the thing that I would most recommend.
I like it. I do think it's interesting, Michelle, as per so often in our time doing things together, we interpreted the blindsided idea differently. Mm-hmm. So I totally understand and like and agree with yours. And I was like, oh, I took it to be much smaller. Oh. Blindsided. I took these blindsided to be, they say 1 to 100 or 0 to 100, which I suppose just made it a big scale, but my brain still took it as just anytime I'm 12 out of 10, right? I have maxed. I'm at my, if we're using the lovely terminology from DBT sheets, I'm at my skills breakdown point. And as somebody with a, beefy, burly amygdala, I have reached my skills breakdown points for far smaller things rather than, major life-changing events that should only happen once or twice a year. So I just wanted to normalize that, not normalize. That person might have been talking about either one of those. But if it's the one, I'm here for you, friend. I, too, flip my lid about much smaller things on occasion. And if that's what you were talking about, if Michelle's flavor of stuff was what you're talking about, then less so the couple of skills that I'm about to give. Not that they can't work at all, but they're still skills. They're still a thing. You have to, in some way, shape, or form, remember to do in the moment, right? And I'm super with you, Michelle, on the idea that there are some things that are so big that even those super simple things are just not gonna be there. You're almost not there, in your own brain in those moments, right? So if it's that, then echo everything Michelle said. If it's the smaller version, then those are fantastic opportunities to utilize either tip or stop. Or really, you could do stop and tip, right? Who says or when you could say and also? And that's the thing you could do after you've stepped away if you really, really want to, before proceeding mindfully. Yes, I am just using pieces from the acronyms. I'm so sorry, people, if you guys don't know what it is. So those are two great, crisis survival skills, I think is what Do they actually call stop a crisis survival skill? I don't think they do. I think they only call tip a crisis survival skill.
They do, but to me it is.
Right? Me too. I've always thought of it that way. I lump it in there with like ride the wave and shit. But technically, I don't think DBT actually does. Right? So if you're having one of those moments where you're a 12 out of 10, right? Like something just, you're like, wow, I didn't know I was going to have a big feeling about this. Especially if, for instance, you're perhaps having a really big feeling about something maybe other people might not have a really big reaction to, or you maybe didn't even know you were going to have a really big reaction to. Then, yeah, tip and stop can be great ways to respond in the moment that take far less brain power than a lot of DBT skills, right? You still have to remember that they are a skill and to do something, but generally speaking, they don't use a lot of thought, they don't use a lot of consideration. You can kind of get things started easy, and they therefore more accessible when we're in those skills breakdown points. Michelle said it, I'll say it again, and I'm sure she and I will both say it repeatedly throughout the rest of our DBT existence. I super agree with the idea of daily skill use, especially in lower emotional intensity situations, as the best way to get them into, as this listener said, into muscle memory, right? Just to repeat, doing it with low consequences, right? So that you don't have as much trepidation or anxiety about doing it, and you get the reinforcement of getting it practiced, rehearsed, comfortable, familiar. Also, I just wanted to back up that everybody has those moments where they're blindsided, right? Whether it's Michelle's version or my version or both, right? Everybody in life has some number of these things happen to them. And so definitely doubling down on the call for self-compassion. One of the things that I occasionally need to remind myself of, because I am one of these super emotional people, is and I can get really shamey, right? It's super easy to get shamey about times when our emotions bitch slap us faster than and then we do something, like immediately do something that we then regret or was inappropriate or things like that. You're still responsible for anything and everything you did, etc. But do still try and have compassion for yourself, because the biological fact of the matter is that emotions are faster than thoughts. They just are. They happen biologically more quickly by a not inconsiderable margin. You are not just capable of, it's how you are built, is to have an emotional response and take action before having conscious thought. That is how you are wired. It's great that we manage not to do things in that order the vast majority of the time. That's fantastico. Hey, thumbs up all of us. And you are biologically wired for that. So try not to shame yourself too hard in those moments when your biology wins over your skills. It can be unfortunate, but it doesn't need to be a reason to hate yourself. So I feel like I kind of went on that one.
It's all good stuff. Yeah, and I like that, right? What is the 100, right? 0 to 100. Right. What could the 100 look like, right? And we both addressed, I guess, different ways that could look, and different.
Yeah, yours is like finding out your partner died, and I'm like, when your partner says the triggering phrase, you know?
Exactly. Yep. Whatever your 100 is, listeners, like, just go with that. Yeah. Okay, the next one is a short one. It just says, hello, I love the podcast, and I've learned so much. Are there any skills to help with being more assertive in everyday life?
Yes! Sorry, don't want to bury the lead. I'll start with the yes. No, I did want to tease a little bit first. This was definitely one of the cases where Michelle got to the notes first and took, like, I don't know, the answers that I think anybody would consider as the answers to these questions. But I actually like that. Normally I would just steal one of her obvious answers and like take it for myself, but I was like, nah, I'm a think outside the box for this one. So Michelle's answers are correct. Mine are interesting. Though here, Michelle, you want to laugh? One of my friends today, I was like, tell me to go do my podcast notes, because I was resisting this morning. And my friend said, go. He was teasing, for the record, but he said, go have ChatGPT write your podcast notes for today. And I was like, I don't even know how the fuck one would do that. I've never used ChatGPT. And he was like, well, what's the question?
Me neither.
And I was like, well, this is the shortest question, right? This is the shortest question for everything. I'm like, so here's the question, friend. So he put it into ChatGPT in some fashion, and I laughed my ass off so hard at the response, Michelle. It just gave the whole interpersonal effectiveness skills list. That was ChatGPT's answer to are there any skills for me to use to be more assertive in day-to-day life. I was like, all right, I can see a couple of these, but where are we going with this ChatGPT? Like, what? Anyway, I just thought people might chuckle a little bit at that. Don't go ask ChatGPT what DBT skills do use, it doesn't
It'll
know.
be super generic.
Well, super generic or just flat out inappropriate. So, all right, what are my actual answers to the question, though? My first suggestion for a way to be more assertive in everyday life is to use either cope ahead and or effective rethinking and paired relaxation, depending on kind of what the circumstances are. So I imagine using cope ahead for bigger events or situations where perhaps you need multiple skills, right? If I'm going to go to a wedding with family. Why do we always use weddings? Funerals, reunions, whatever. A big family gathering of some sort. Graduation party. I don't know. I swear to Jesus, people, I took my ADHD meds today. I don't know what's going on. Anyway, I too can focus. So if you have bigger situations like a big family gathering where, I don't know, you might need to use X, Y, and Z skill with Aunt Gladys, and I'm going to need to pull out this other skill when I interact with Dad, and I'm going to need to, right, like this is a big, complex situation. It makes sense to spend time really imagining the whole situation and working through skill by skill how you want to behave in these different situations, right? So cope ahead is going to be more like a elaborate daydream, right, that might go on for a while and more useful for some of these larger or more complicated events. If, on the other hand, you're in a place where, for instance, your own thoughts are likely the thing that are getting in the way, or it's just a smaller kind of situation, perhaps, that you encounter on the regular, then effective rethinking and paired relaxation can be great, right? So, I don't know, if the family reunion's a good idea for cope ahead, if perhaps one of the places you have a really hard time asserting yourself is talking to a boss and having a conversation about getting a raise or something, and you know you're used to the thought processes of I'm terrified of authority, I can't do this. Right? Not that I'm talking like anybody I know, like myself, perhaps. Right? So instead, if you know that you tend to tell yourself things like I can't do this, I'm too scared of authority, this is going to go terribly, or whatever, right? If your thoughts are definitely getting in the way of you being assertive, effective rethinking and paired relaxation can do a lot to help there. And my second idea, which I guess those two are kind of two, but they're kind of one in their own way. I know they're separate, but I really see them as being friends. The second idea I had was actually building mastery, right? The B of ABC. One of the things that gets in the way of assertiveness is a lack of self-confidence, right? So while it may not be in the arena that is specific to the assertiveness that you want to display, right? It may not be that you are building mastery in speaking better to bosses or wrangling Aunt Gladys, but just, even if all you're doing is practicing your legendary grilled cheese skills, feeling like you are competent and confident at actions does a lot in the background to support us behaving more assertively in the foreground. So those are my thoughts.
I like that you took it that direction because to me, I totally agree with you. Assertiveness starts from the inside out, right? If we're not feeling confident on the inside, that's probably going to leak through in how we are acting and what we're saying and how we're saying it and that kind of a thing. So yes, if you can use some of the skills that Kate was just talking about to really, I don't know, kind of boost yourself up internally before you ever utter a word to another person, that is a really good place to begin. Maybe unsurprisingly, the two skills that I chose, drum roll, were fast and dear man. Is anybody surprised? Probably not. Fast is all about self-respect and asserting yourself, not apologizing and sticking to your values and all of those things. And then dear man is all about how to make requests effectively. So, yeah, I'm not going to walk through every letter of the acronym, but listener, those are the episodes to go to if you are wanting some more concrete guidance on what assertiveness can look like when you're communicating with other people, to either set boundaries and say no to things they may be asking of you, or how to assert yourself in making requests of them. Those are the skills right there. So that's what Kate was talking about. She's like, yeah I know it's fast and dear man, but I'll find other stuff to talk about. Those are the ones. I guess kind of 2.5 though. Here's another one to sprinkle in as a bonus is to think about the dime game. So the dime game can be a really helpful tool because it's all about, I think almost verbatim how it says it on the worksheet, is it's all about how strongly to ask or how firmly to say no, basically, when either something is being asked of you or you are asking something of another person. because there's a range there, right? There are absolutely times where I think it even says on the dive game, it's like, keep asking and don't take no for an answer.
It does. That is one of the options.
Which sounds so extreme, right? Like so assertive, maybe even almost verging on aggressive with that. But there are those times and situations, all the way down to times where it's basically like, hey, like, you just should really kind of take this. Like, don't really bother. I don't know, remember exactly how it phrases it, but it's more or less just kind of like, yep, you don't really have much of a leg to stand on here with saying no to this or that kind of an idea. And everything in between, right? It's kind of a 1 through 10 scale, more or less, the dime game is of, how strongly to ask or say no. So that can also be something that you can use when you're thinking about asserting yourself and you're feeling nervous about it. That can give you some guidance of how much to stick to your guns. And I think the dime game can be really, really validating, where you might, for at least this is how I think it's most useful with the stuff that I struggle with, which is that a lot of times I'm like, I really want this thing, but I struggle to think that I'm like deserving of it. So I'm more likely that even if I make the request and someone is kind of initially like, nope, I'm more just like, oh, okay, fine, no problem, just back off. Whereas the dime game might really give a clearer message of like, no, keep going. Like, keep asking, albeit doing it, of course, in a respectful, skillful way. Don't be a dick. But also, like, don't just give up immediately when there's something here that's worth asserting yourself about. So the time game can be very helpful for that as some of the prep work before you do Fast and Dear Man. So do the stuff that Kate was talking about, right? Pick either cope ahead or effective rethinking and paired relaxation. Make sure you're doing some build mastery in like your day-to-day life. And then take a look at the dime game. And then go into the actual conversation that you're needing to have. Another way that you can practice is to use Fast or Dear Man with a trusted other. Go to a friend, go to a partner, go to whoever is somebody that you really trust who's not the actual person that you need to talk to, and say, hey, I'm wanting to talk to so-and-so about such and such. Can I try it out with you first? Just so I can get my feet wet with this and that I can feel more comfortable and feel more confident when I'm actually in the situation saying it to the person I'm going to say it to. Practicing with a trusted other can be really, really helpful. You can practice in the mirror too, but definitely try to find a trusted other. What I most recommend. So that's the stuff that I got there.
I like it. Yeah, I forget about the dime game sometimes, but it's a good one.
That game is awesome.
It is awesome. I actually ended up referencing it, I think, for this one, because you referenced it for the one before and I was reading the notes. All right, the next one reads, new to group, first post. Started DBT group about 6 weeks ago. Tonight I'm feeling lots of shame about how I handled the situation and how my husband responded. I had invited a friend to go to a comedy show with me. She basically told me her sister had... I'd missed my space. She basically told me her sister had bought tickets for her already. I suggested we could go as a group, and she responded that one of her 3 sisters may object to it. I told her that I was okay if she felt like she should go with her sisters. She tried to figure out a way that I could find a seat near hers. Meanwhile, I bought a pair of tickets for myself and decided I would ask another friend. Was I too passive by saying it was okay if she wanted to go with her sisters? I was just trying to be polite. My husband told me I should have communicated better with my friend in order for her to accept my invite. My therapist told me he was being dismissive and not validating my feelings. I struggle greatly with social relationships, and it is very defeating that I keep getting passed up in these situations.
Yeah. Oh, I think so often, right? As in almost every post or every email we receive, inevitably there are things that we don't know. And in this situation, the biggest question that I wish I could ask this listener is to say, okay, so basically when she responded to you that way and she more or less said, hey, I really don't think it's best that we go as a group because I think one of my sisters may object to it. So I think I'm just going to stick with going with my sisters, right? It sounds like that's the answer you got. And so much of this depends on what you then felt right after you got that news and how strongly you felt it. as far as whether or not you're being too passive. So for example, right? Like, I'm sure you felt some degree of disappointment. How could you not have, right? It's like a bummer, right? It might have just been that, right? Like a 3 or less on the emotional scale. I just kind of like, okay, bummer. I wish we were going together, but okay. And that might have been all. But if, let's say, you were feeling like an 8 or higher, like profound disappointment that she was saying she wouldn't go with you, and it was like an 8 or above, then that's different. So I don't know exactly what you felt or how strongly you felt it when you got that news. But to me, it's not passive. If, let's say, it was kind of like a 3 or less and more like a shoulder shrug, like, okay, that sucks, but okay. If that's how it was, then you're not doing anything wrong by being like, oh, that's okay. Like, I understand if you go with your sisters because that's what you really felt. But however, if you were really deeply upset and then you came to her and you're like, oh no, it's totally okay that you go, I'll be fine. I'll figure it out with someone else. That's not authentic, right? Because you really were feeling a tremendous amount of hurt and you were stifling that and not sharing it with her. And I would like to think that there would be a way to be authentic and be skillful, right? So it's kind of like what I said with the last listener. Don't be a dick, right? So you don't have to go to her and be like, how dare you go with your sisters instead of going with me? That really hurts my feelings. I feel like you're being a terrible friend to me. No. That's not how it needs to go. But maybe you would say something like, oh, I want to be honest, like, that is kind of hard for me to hear that we're not going together, and I just want to be really transparent about that's tough for me. So thank you for, I appreciate your efforts to try to make it work, and also, yeah, I am feeling pretty bummed with the outcome here. You don't have to say that it's okay if it doesn't actually feel okay to you. So that's the biggest thing that I was kind of curious about here, is that yes, it would be passive saying, oh yeah, it's fine if you go with your sisters. I'm all good. It's like, no, I'm struggling with you going with your sisters. So then it's figuring out a skillful response while also sharing that it's not feeling okay to you. Like you can't control another person's decisions, right? You can't make her go with you, no matter how badly you might wish she would. But there is a way to share, like, ooh, ouch, that does hurt, and I'm struggling with that. You can share that. So that's what I was kind of thinking. But in general, with what we do know in what was shared here, because we don't know, again, what emotion you felt or how intensely you felt it, if I just go with what's purely stated here, or you're basically like, I was just trying to be polite. My husband told me I should have communicated better with my friend in order for her to accept my invite. I mean, listener, in general, you sounded pretty skillful to me. You did, right? In general. And it sounds like you and your friend maybe found a middle ground, right? Which is that she was trying to figure out a way that you could still be near her, even if not in her group with her and her sisters. You didn't take this, because this definitely would not have been skillful, to basically just be like, well, screw her, I'm just not going to go. Right? That'd be willful as hell. Instead, it sounded like you actually were practicing a good amount of willingness by being like, okay, my plan A was to go with her. But since now she's saying, I can't go with her, my plan B is to ask another person to go with me. I think that's very skillful. I think that's a great option to go with. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm a little prickly about what it seems like your husband might have been implying, that There might have been some way to make her go with you. I don't think there's a way for us to make anybody do anything. Again, it could have been this potential outcome where if you had shared with her, oh, I'm really deeply hurt by this. Again, only if you were actually feeling deeply hurt. Maybe she would have gone, oh, I didn't realize that this would hurt you so much. Since I know that this is maybe a really big deal to you, I'll try to figure out another way. I mean, it's possible that she could have responded like that, but we don't know. She may have still been like, well, even if this is really, really, really hard on you, sorry. Like, I'm still going to go with my sisters instead of you. We just can't know. So, in general, I think you have a lot to feel proud of with how you responded. And yeah, all that I would share as a takeaway is just make sure that you're not saying that you're okay with things if they are really impacting you on a large emotional scale. Only say you're okay with things if the impact is pretty small. That's what I would suggest.
I like it. I don't know, Michelle, it's kind of funny. I was reading your notes today. I was like, man, unlike just pure DBT skills stuff, I don't have much to say that Michelle didn't say. I'm like, yep, that. And so I was like, well, I'm going to sweep up in the back, come in with a bunch of different specific skills for different things. So, all right, so I told you I was going to talk about the dime game, so I have to make a pass for the dime game and saying, like, if you maybe have in the future have a hard time discerning how hard to push about a situation, the dime game could be a specific tool to bring in to decide that, though I really like Michelle's, like, how are you feeling, though? Question more for how to decide, or at least at least a good part of how to decide, right? Like, definitely bringing in maybe some wise mind for that, so you can be honoring your whole self, like, well, there's practical considerations, but also I'm feeling an 8 out of 10 upset about this scale, right? So dime game could help. Oh, and wise mind, dime game and wise mind could help. Then let's see, if it turned out that you were an 8 out of 10 and you really did want to try one more time to get your friend to go with you instead, that's a great Dear Man opportunity, right? Because Dear Man is all about, in the language of DBT, objectives effectiveness. Mm-hmm. When getting the thing is the most important thing, right? So you could have made a go at Dear Man, not saying you should have, not shooting on you at all, but just if you had come to a different conclusion than you did at that moment, or in the future, if you end up in a different situation where you decide you do want to push, Dear Man is a great way to do that. If pushing didn't work, or if you were just like middlingly attached and so we're still okay with saying no but upset, I do want to always push for self-soothing with the 5 senses. That's a great way to handle disappointment and other sort of soft squishy feelings like that. So that's a thing you could have done for self-care afterwards. With your husband, I imagine you could have used fast potentially, or give, depending on what was going to work better for helping bring him around to being a little bit more engaged and a little less what seems to be, right, I guess as Michelle was pointing out, we don't know anything, but, right, like saying, like, I don't know, seems a little dismissive maybe. So you might have been able to be like, no, I'm certain, right, like with fast if you wanted to. Sort of assert yourself there. And I feel like there was one other thing I was going to mention. I don't remember it. My brain is so scattered today, guys. I'm so sorry. I blame grief.
No, you definitely threw in some good skills.
All right, are we on to the next one? I think we're on to the last one.
Are.
Last one.
Yeah, the last one.
Oof.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
This is I don't know. I really like this one. I think this is such a good thing to talk about.
Yeah, that's fair.
I think a lot of people can relate to this. Okay, here we go. Every time my therapist and I try to scratch the surface of my trauma, I emotionally can't handle it. I try to suppress the tears because they'll get out of control, but that creates built-up anger and rage. I also find myself pinching and picking my skin to abate the tears. I desperately want to talk through my trauma, but physically, I can't. Doing skills beforehand doesn't seem to help. What can I do in the moment to contain these emotional reactions so I can talk through these memories?
All right. So many different thoughts. So, like, I think the very first thing that came to me was a curiosity around what does out of control tears mean or look like? Right? Like, what does tears getting out of control mean or look like? Because my very first thought is to not fight the tears at all, right? Which I understand is perhaps seemingly blatantly missing the question, since the person did not say, should I feel these feelings or not, Kate? It was a, hey, how do I not do this thing? And I'm saying, well, maybe do the thing. So I understand that might sound a little bit pushy, but I do just want to offer the idea that you might be able to, instead of having to find a way to prevent the emotional response from occurring in the moment, you may be able to utilize something like ride the wave and let the intense crying move through your system. Yeah, it could mean a lot of different things. The most intense crying for me has always involved vomiting. I would be pretty loath to do that in a therapist's office without pretty explicit consent for the possibility first, right? Because I don't like vomiting. I wouldn't like other people to vomit in front of me necessarily, or like, is this something that maybe that once it starts, you end up crying for 7 hours, right? So, it's possible that I just don't know enough of the story to understand really what out of control tears mean or look like. But if it's something that is not quite as intense, I guess, well, actually, back up a little bit. I did want to also just offer some empathy, I guess, as someone who I absolutely hate and physically struggle to allow myself to cry hard in front of people. So I do want to own that I am someone who can struggle in my own way with that. I don't know if it's the same way as the listener, but I can definitely have an enormous amount of internal pushback. I struggle to allow myself still to cry in front of my therapist sometimes, right? Like, I get that this can be hard. So not saying that simple and easy are in any way related to each other. But if it's something that could actually, be contained within the therapeutic space, I think that there's a lot of merit to allowing the feeling to pass through you, as opposed to trying to prevent it from coming up and happening in the first place. The reason that it's my first thought is twofold. One, it would potentially help you see that the therapy space can be a safe container for intense emotions. When I read I can't start crying because my tears will get out of control, Michelle and I are people reading one little, paragraph here, so it could be totally wrong. But what I hear in that is like, people can't handle my emotions, right? Or my emotions are too big, right? Like, it's overwhelming, it's too big, it's too much. Other people can't witness them or contain them. They aren't safe, like that kind of thing. I certainly know that's a thing I've felt. And so I did just want to say that it's possible that this could be a place to learn that therapy can be a safe container for your intense emotions. They can be safe there and seen there and held there and not rejected there. Also, again, if it's something that you can have happen in session, it allows you to see that the crying will subside and get better, and that it won't actually harm you to go through the emotional expression in the first place. Ideally, being in the session with the therapist can help you a lot with moving through the crying and into it subsiding. But, this is a space where you get to see, the therapy can allow this, and that crying, even wildly intense, awful crying, doesn't actually harm you. So, if on the other hand, for various and sundry reasons, some of which I already listed, many of which I couldn't yet, is that the other thought is to utilize sensations to stop the emotional expression, right? If it is that you would vomit or have a seizure, or, that would go for 17 hours and you can't fit that in therapy, you might utilize some more intense or attention-getting sensations. So some of the traditional ones used are like gripping ice, right? So holding ice in your fist, using rubber bands and snapping them on yourself or on your wrist, consuming some like stupidly spicy or sour piece of candy or food, or potentially this is some like really powerful essential oil, like something like peppermints or something like that would just sort of be really shocking and attention getting. And or maybe a fidget of some sort that really takes your attention and moves you out of your sort of body and out of your emotional experience. Or some other form of distraction, right? Sensations are great because they start in the body, and, the emotional expressions are usually happening in the body, so it can be a nice bottom up on both cases. But sometimes we need our brains to interfere. The way that I try most commonly to help clients stop crying who are having a really hard time kind of bringing themselves back out of a really intense crying episode is I just start asking them what their favorite fill in the blank here is. What's your favorite ice cream? What's your favorite season? What's your favorite Muppet? What's your favorite? It normally just startles people, and it's not what their thought process was at all, right? And so that can sometimes be a way to kick ourselves out of pretty snowballing emotional response that's starting. So my thought one is, don't stop the feels. Let the feels happen. And then my second thought is, if I'm just being an ignorant, horrible person for saying that because I'm just ill-informed and don't understand the thing being proposed, then I would mostly suggest utilizing intense sensations to knock your body off of the course of tumbling down the weeping stairs. That's me.
Mm-hmm. Really, really good suggestions there. I also, more or less in my response, I did not address what the listener is actually wanting us to address.
Oh, no.
I just didn't. I just took it in a different direction. Because I feel like this is important to talk about that people may not think about very often. Because I held this belief for a long time as a therapist. I think a lot of therapists hold this belief. I think a lot of people who are in therapy hold this belief, which is this belief of like, I need to talk about my trauma. I need to tell the story. I need to recount what happened. I need to do that. That's what I'm supposed to do. That's what therapy is, right? It can look that way. It also doesn't need to look that way. I think we're coming to see there's actually a lot of trauma treatments where the person going through the treatment, it's not part of the treatment to talk about the trauma itself. Like EMDR, eye movement, desensitization, and reprocessing, which Kate's actually been trained in. I have not been trained in that, so I only know so much. Kate knows more. But from what I do know, the person doesn't ever have to tell you what the trauma was. So it's not like the person goes in and they go, well, this thing happened to me when I was 7, and I'm going to tell you in as much detail as I can remember what happened. No, you don't do that. That's not part of it. You don't have to say what happened to you when you were 7, right? So I think it's important for this listener, but for anybody listening who's maybe felt this exact same way, where they're like, hey, I'm feeling like I'm supposed to talk about these trauma memories with my therapist, and I try to do it and it just gets too hard and I stop myself, but I want to and I feel like I should, and that kind of a thing. What do you hope to get out of that? What is your reason for wanting to talk about it? And if your reason, if you're really honest with yourself, is just like, well, I'm supposed to, that is not a good enough reason. No. If you are feeling in any way pushed by your therapist, where your therapist is kind of being like, you should really tell me, like, in as much detail as you can remember what happened to you when you were 7. No, you do not. You can push back against that and say, nope, I'd rather not go there, right? Because there's a lot of ways to heal from trauma without actually retelling the trauma, is what we now know in this field. But I think we did not know that for a very long time. I think we just thought like, yeah, this is what's supposed to happen. Because the main thing that I believe about processing trauma is that the goal is to change the aftermath of how the trauma impacted you, right? For better or worse, whether it's from trauma or not, whatever decisions we are making as we go through our current life, we're making those decisions from somewhere. Something from our past informs our present. That's just how it works. Everything we're doing today, we're doing for some reason because we learned it somewhere. But it's less about going back to, well, where did I learn that thing from? You don't have to know where you learned it from in order to just go, well, I'd like to change it. I can see that I'm doing this thing over and over and over again. It's not really working for me. I want to be able to do something else differently. And you can do that work without going all the way back to the beginning. Don't get me wrong. It can be helpful to go back to the beginning. That can be a good thing to do. And if that also feels too overwhelming, you don't have to. And this may sound really bad what I'm about to say, but I think sometimes people in therapy, they live in the past. All they want to do is talk about when they were 7, for example. That's all they want. They're not talking about their present day life. They're just like, I'm just going to repeat over and over and over and over the things that happened to me when I was 7. Well, this may sound very insensitive how I'm about to say it, but you are not 7 anymore. So it's figuring out how to connect the dots between your past and your present. But you can do that with actually very minimal talking about your past if you don't want to. And you can still then decide and get clear on what it's going to look like moving forward to change how that thing from when you were 7 impacted you. So that's what's most important, is to talk through the aftermath of your trauma rather than the trauma itself and how it continues to impact you. That's what I would recommend trying. See how that feels. See how that feels to be like, well, I have a really hard time going to this place. I have a really hard time going to that place because it reminds me of trauma, right? Again, you don't have to get into more detail about the trauma, right? It's just hard for me to go to that place. But I'd like to go to that place. How do I start using DBT skills, right? Like, go to that place. How do I make a plan so that I make a change to face the thing? Kate already talked through, I think, really well how you can use DBT skills to help you through moments when the trauma is like really, really activated, and how you can try to figure out a happy middle ground where it's like, okay, I'm expressing what I'm feeling and I'm also not completely drowning in what I'm feeling. I think that's important. And I think it's also important to know where a healthy tolerance level is for emotional expression. That, again, may feel kind of like uncomfortable and strange and weird and awkward, but also like, okay, I can do this. Just because it feels uncomfortable doesn't mean it's unsafe. I can do it, versus when it crosses that line and you're like, hold up, too much, nope, abort mission, right? Like, knowing those different levels for yourself is going to be really important, and trying to work within your window of tolerance to be like, okay, yeah, I can express, and even though I don't necessarily like expressing this way, I can do it and it's okay. That, I would say, is the goal. But hopefully some of that's helpful. But that was just my first big thing where they're like, I really want to talk through my trauma. I was like, but you don't have to if you don't want to. Just so you know, listener, you don't have to if you don't want to. It's okay.
That's fair. I like it. You guys don't ever get to see us, so I figure I'd make you guys laugh a little bit that Michelle has been privy to a sort of chair / half of Kate striptease during this thing. Has been so swelteringly hot and humid in this room. I've just been like throwing pillows off my chair so they've stopped touching me, and took off my shirt. I'm like, I'm melting. It's so hot in here. Anyway, that's what I get for not remembering to bring up a fan before we started to record. Thank you for putting up with my shenanigans, Michelle.
No worries. Anytime.
That's it for us for Q&A 63. To try and think of something more exciting about 64 before we get around to that one. If, however, you would like to be on? That's not the way to put it. If you would like your question on, there we go, a future Q&A episode, please feel free to post in the Facebook group and or send us an email, dbtandmepodcast@gmail.com. We will respond sooner in written form than here, we promise.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
To learn more about us and the DBT skills we're teaching each week, join our Facebook group. Simply log in to your Facebook profile and search for DBT and Me Podcast.